Hello, everyone, and a very good day to all of you. I am Lakshitendra Singh on behalf of the Leo Club of University of Colombo. Now, as some of you may already be aware, the official newsletter of the Leo Club of University of Colombo, titled Our Essence, is conducting a talk show series titled Detect and Correct. The aim of this series is to bring to light and discuss on contentious issues in the current context as interview sessions featuring some of Sri Lanka's most renowned personalities from diverse backgrounds. At the outset, let me remind you that you can tune in and watch this session on YouTube or read about it on our official newsletter as well. Right. That being said, let me warmly welcome you to the sixth episode of Detect and Correct. And today, our topic of discussion is a national as well as a global issue. Now, this is an issue which is considered to be one of the most prevalent forms of human rights violations, an issue that knows no boundaries in terms of country, religion, caste, or culture, an issue that inflicts massive physical and mental abuse and trauma on the victims, an issue that is outright discriminatory and undermines the dignity of human beings, an issue which we all identify as gender-based violence. Now, unfortunately, Sri Lanka also faces this issue and is prevalent in the Sri Lankan context as well. And you may have heard of reports coming in through the pandemic times as well of increased incidents of gender-based violence in the country. To discuss this timely and imperative issue, we have with us the Director of Grassrooted Trust and Bakamuno, activist, film and theatre actor, Mr. Hans Billy Moria. Once again, a very good morning to you, Mr. Billy Moria. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good. Glad to be with you.
Right. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Let's straight away head on to the discussion for today. Let's start off with the basics. How would you define gender-based violence? What are the forms of gender-based violence that are there? And if you were to trace the evolution of the concept over the years, how would you do that?
How long do we have? The question is it's a wide question. So let's break it down. Gender-based violence is any form of violence that is done to another person. Be it emotional violence or mental violence or physical violence or even verbal violence, right? So that's how generally it is defined. Now, you used a very interesting term in your preamble, and that term was human dignity. The Grassrooted Trust is focused on human dignity. So for us, human dignity above all else matters. And that is why when we take a look at violence and when we take a look at gender, we don't fall into this, at least at Grassrooted, we don't play this game of gender-based violence is men committing violence against women. That is not how we look at it. We look at it as a person who commits violence against another person. Now, if you take a look at the different forms of gender-based violence, I'd like to focus a little bit on the latest manifestation of gender-based violence is what you see online. So if you take a look at cyber exploitation and violence, which is another area that Grassrooted works on. So even if you take two young people, right? Let's take two young people, they're in a relationship. Let's say they choose consensually to share or exchange intimate photographs or make an intimate video. The violence that then comes when, let's say, one or both parties decide to end that relationship. Now, you spoke a little bit about COVID times and about the increase of violence during COVID times. Now, if you take a look at, just as a snapshot, if you take a look at CERT data, that is the Computer Emergency Readiness Team, look at CERT data for 2020, we had about 14,000 reported cases. Okay, approximately 14,000 reported cases of online violence as a result of the fallout of based on relationships online. The previous data was 3,000. Okay, so you see the increase, because a lot of us were in lockdown, a lot of us were at home, and some of the relationship issues that we have handled, the cases that we have handled, have started within the COVID lockdown period. So the relationship starts after lockdown, ends during lockdown, and the violations happen during lockdown. Right? So that's how short that lifespan can be of a form of online violence. And I think your listeners or your viewers would know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, you go to bakamono.lk and you can find out more about cyber exploitation and violence and the different manifestations of it. Now, is this new? Because you want to know about the evolution. Is this new? This is not new, right? We have been consistently horrible to each other forever. I mean, that's, if you take a look at history, we have been consistently horrible to each other forever. But put the global picture aside and let's come to Sri Lanka a little bit. You know, Sri Lanka, we like to talk a lot about our culture. We like to focus on the fact that we have this ancient culture. Ape sanskrutiya mම පොඩ්ඩක් කිව්වා. අපේ සංස්කෘතිය ගැන කතා කරන්න අපි ඉක්මන් වෙනවානේ. පට්පට් ගාලා අපි සංස්කෘතිය ගැන කතා කරනවා. මේක අපේ සංස්කෘතියට පටහැනි වැඩක්. But however, it doesn't appear to be that violence is in any way alien to our culture. And I think one of the main reasons for that is the way that in Sri Lanka we have been brought up in a way to perhaps even celebrate violence. So for example, from the time we go to school, let's just take a simple thing like bullying, right? Let's just take bullying. Let's just take humiliating another person. Let's just take putting down another person. Let's just take how we are taught that feel about ourselves, we need to put somebody else down. Let's just take a look at the sports culture of this country in terms of the senior junior culture that evolves, and the sort of violence and the ragging and the kind of hazing, if you like, or the kind of initiations that happen around sports culture in Sri Lanka and in Sri Lankan schools, right? So violence seems to be really inbred into how we react to each other, how we talk to each other. Look at the language that we use, right? Now I'll ask you a question, if I may. You speak Sinhala, I'm sure. Yes?
Yes.
Right. So I'd like to ask you about two words. I'd like to ask you about the word baduwa and kælla. And I'd like to ask you if you've ever used them, or if you've never used them rather, in context of a woman or a girl. Have you never used them, or have you used them in the past?
I have used them, Mr. Bilmore.
Because we have normalized that language, right? So now if you take a look at one public transport, right? So take a look at the UNFP done in 2016, and if you take a look at the Oxfam study done in 2018 or 19, you can look it up. Over 90% of women over the age of 14 have reported some form of sexual violation on public transport, on trains and buses. Over 90%, that is an enormous number, an extraordinary number in a country that purports to have a culture of respect. So I'm going to ask you another question. How would you define respect?
That's a pretty tough question to answer, but if I may very simply state,
is it a tough
if I may
question?
very simply state,
sorry to put you on the spot. It's just that it's something that How
That's
would you
all right.
define it? What would you say respect? What would you say respect is? How would you define respect?
Uh, Respect is basically, um, say, acknowledging and being okay and letting another person basically live the way that person wants to live, and acknowledge the person for who he is or who she is.
That's a fine looking definition, and I think maybe the openness that you have has allowed for you to come up with the definition on the spot. Coming up with the definition on the spot, well done. Because to tell you frankly, when I ask that question, a lot of people struggle to define respect because in Sri Lanka, respect has been reduced to a power relation. එක බල සම්බන්ධයක් බවට මේ සීමා වෙලා තියෙනවා. So when we ask kids respect, they know what the outward trappings of respect is. They know stand up in the classroom when the teacher was saying, right? They know about දෙමව්පියන්ට වැඳලා තමයි ඉස්කෝලේ යන්නේ. Or things like that. They know those outward trappings. But what it actually means, there is a struggle. And then when you ask them whom you respect, whom do you respect? Then the answers come quick and fast. Not so much what is respect or ගෞරවය කියන දේ නිර්වචනය කරන්න බෑ. ඒ කාටද ගෞරවය කළ යුතු කියලා ඇහුවම එව්වනම් පට්පට් ගාලා එනවා. Right? And when you see whom you should respect, you see that power relation come in, right? So parents, teachers, clergy, seniors in the school, you know what I mean? That comes in, and you can see that then this respect is always something that goes out and up. And that is part of grassroots work, to tell you frankly, is to try and take respect and turn it inward to begin with. And to try and make respect about self-respect, about self, and about how we can help our young people value self, and how we need, all of us, we need to work on self-esteem. And the reason I bring self-esteem in here, because I don't know about your experience, but in my experience working with perpetrators and victims of violence, self-esteem often emerges as a key factor, right? Because the man or the woman who perpetrates violence on another man or a woman, one of the most common factors is low self-esteem of that perpetrator, right? So in some way he or she feels less, and in order to fill that lessness or to fill that void, violence is perpetrated. So I think taking a look at, if you want, even psychological models like learned behavior or modeling behavior, where our children are watching us, our children are looking at how we react to the world. Our parents are huge factors here in terms of how a kid, now you would have watched your dad, or if your dad is around, you would have watched your dad, or you would have watched your mom. You have learned from that experience. You learn from the family. You learn from the people, including even domestic staff, whoever is in your space. As a little kid, we are learning all the time. And what are the perpetrations of violence that happen? Little everyday perpetrations of violence that occur, right? So this builds up, and this is where today in 2021, I mean, what happens online now? Look at what happened to this young woman who just won the equivalent of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you know, that Lakshapati or something. She just won that. Did you see what happened to her online? Did you see how she was ripped apart? So while we celebrated her, we also ripped her apart, and possibly because of her ethnicity. But the point here is, look at that. Look at where it comes from. So this is a very real issue that we really need to grapple with. And grappling with it means that we need to take a look at the fact that at the end of the day, we are what you would call a biological algorithm, right? It's about input and it's about output, right? So it's about learned behavior, it's about modeling behavior, it's what we learn. So it's what comes in generally goes out. So we need to make sure that if we want to bet any day, we need to try and manage what goes in. So young people like you, adults, parents have a huge responsibility and I'm a parent of a 3-year-old, I can see it happening in front of me. They are watching you and they are soaking in every single thing you say and do. So our output as adults, as thinking Sri Lankans, ලාංකිකයන් හැටියට අපේ උදාහරණය අපි මොනවාරි උදාහරණයක්ද අපි අපේ ජීවිතේ උදාහරණයක් දෙන්න පුළුවන්ද? That is very important as we move forward. I hope I answered your question and I didn't ramble too much.
No, completely. I understand where you were coming from, Mr. Billimore, and I think those are important points which I think we will have further discussion on. Which brings me to the second question, which is also related to something that you touched upon when you gave me the answer to the first question, is that whenever we read about gender-based violence or whenever we hear about it, even in terms of news or other reports, the terms gender-based violence and violence against women are used synonymously or used interchangeably. I'm not going to ask you what your opinion about this is, because I'm sure I know what your opinion about this is by this point. But if you could elaborate it and educate us as to why this has happened and why it shouldn't be the case, I think that will be helpful.
Okay, it's like this. The reason that gender-based violence and violence against women and girls are used interchangeably is because women and girls are primarily the victims and survivors of violence in this country, right? It is not the men. It doesn't mean that men do not experience violence. It is just that the way our patriarchal structure exists, women and girls are primarily the victims and survivors of violence, right? Women and girls are the ones who are getting gang raped. Now, I'll give you an example. We live and work in Kurunegala now. We no longer live in Colombo as of last year. Our base of operations is in Kurunegala. We are handling 2 cases in Kurunegala of gang rape. 2 young girls, one in the Gokarella Police Division and one in the Kurunegala Police Division. Okay, 2 young girls. One girl at the point that she was raped, she was 11 years old. And the other girl at the point that she was raped, she was 14 years old. Gang raped. Not one person, but multiple people. Right? Now, the defense within court for one of those rapes was that the girl was asking for it. ඒ කෙල්ල ඒ අවුරුදු 13 ළමයා ඉල්ලන් කෑවා. Why? Because අවුරුදු 11 ළමයා, sorry. අවුරුදු 11 ළමයා ඉල්ලන් කෑවා. Why? Because she didn't look 11 apparently. Apparently she looked 16. Apparently she looked 17. Apparently her body was more developed than an average 11-year-old. So how do you expect these men not to rape her? Was the defense. Because she was asking for it, wanted to have sex at the age of 11. She was asking for people to rape her at the age of 11. Okay, so that was the defense within court. And you can say, yes, of course they had to have that defense. You are a law student, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Of course you need to have that defense. You're trying to get the perpetrators out on bail. Okay, but the point here is, look at how we normalize patriarchal violence in this country, right? So in Sri Lanka, the patriarchy, okay, the patriarchal is strong. We wax lyrical about first female prime minister in the world. We wax lyrical about it and we say we had Chandrika, we had Sirimavo, etc., etc. We wax lyrical about it and we say, what is Kamala Harris? Welcome to the club, etc. Okay, that is where we are, because we are so proud of our heritage. But actually on the ground, what is the reality? The reality is that young men are given a sense of absolute entitlement about women in this country. Okay, from the time we are brought up, we are taught to objectify the woman. We are taught to objectify the girl, right? So not only do we say Badu and Kel, I mean, what is Kel? What is Kel? What is a Kel? Right? A Kel, a piece of something, a piece of something. So if you take a look at Facebook pages, Kellange Kakul, Kellange Passapatta, you know what I mean? The girl is reduced to a body part. She is reduced to a body part, and that is justifiable. That is justifiable. So what we are dealing with, and why gender-based violence and violence against women and girls are used interchangeably and are most commonly clubbed together, is because of patriarchy and the entitlement that young men have. Now, for me, like I said, come back, right? It's not about women and girls. Now, we work very closely with the trans community, for example, right? So those who don't define themselves as either a man or a woman, okay, what about the violence that they face? We work very closely with the sex worker community in Sri Lanka. What about the violence that the sex workers face, right? Can a sex worker, for example, walk into a police station and say that she has been raped? She'll be told, what do you mean? How can you come and say that you have been raped? That is your job. Is it her job? Is it the job of a sex worker to be raped? No, the job of a sex worker is to perform sexual services, not to be raped, right? So this sense of entitlement is something that we must fight. So while I understand the reason for gender-based violence and violence against women and girls being used interchangeably, I think we need a much broader look at this. And we really need to also then look at the kind of violence that men perpetrate against other men, right? Can we even talk about that kind of violence? Can we talk about the sexual violence that men perpetrate against other men, especially, as you know, as a law student with Penal Code Section 365 and 365A, is that even a possible discussion? Can a man walk in to a police station and say that I have been violated? What is our definition of rape in this country? Our definition of rape in this country, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's only limited to penal vaginal intercourse, okay, or penal vaginal rape. What is our marital rape law in this country? Our marital rape law, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but our marital rape law in this country only applies if the husband and the wife are separated at the time. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so if the husband and wife are not separated at the time, then the wife cannot claim rape. Why? Because of the patriarchal structure, the entitlement, right? So that is why we focus on women. That is why the feminists are raising their fists and saying we need equal rights. Okay, so that is not to dismiss feminism or dismiss the fact that women and girls are unequally or disproportionately victimized in this country. But at grassrooted, we believe in a kind of human being approach, if you like. And every time a human being is violated, be it a male, be it someone who is trans, be it that violation of the human being needs to be taken a look at closely, even if it doesn't fall within the so-called definitions of what takes place.
Right. That's very interesting to note, Mr. Bilimoria. And I think stemming from this idea of patriarchy and patriarchal societies, I come to my next question, which is that many of those who discuss about gender-based violence portray as a reason for gender-based violence to exist in society the existing inequalities between men and women. And that is something that, as you very correctly portrayed, regardless of the minority of instances where women have gone to occupy leadership positions, that as a country we are yet to address and find effective solutions for. But the idea is that inequalities between men and women still exist at large. In a 21st century world, how do you think we should work around this issue or find solutions to this issue so that we tackle gender-based violence as well?
See, for me, Grassrooted, again, the team at Grassrooted, we've looked at this from every angle, and we've been in this business. Let's call it a business. Let's call it what it is. It's a business. It's part of the overarching development business. We've been in the business of, let's say, sexual and reproductive health education, or the business of gender-based violence or violence against women and girls for a very long time. And if you take a look at all the prescribed solutions for this, it comes down to education reform. Okay, where we teach young people that the girl and the boy, despite the penis and the vagina, are capable of the same things. So, for example, now part of our workshops, we often use the pink and blue dichotomy, right? How blue is the color that we have settled on for boys, and how pink is the color that we have settled on for girls. And we challenge that dichotomy by showing them that the origins of that pink-blue dichotomy, it was actually reversed, right? So after First World War, pink used to be the color for boys and blue used to be the color for girls. That's how it started. Because red was considered a manly color, purple was considered the color of male clergy. So that dark pink was considered that virile, manly color, which was essential for a boy, and a nice light baby blue, sky blue for the girl. That's how it started. Okay, and that started because people were trying to sell products to parents in England. That's where it started. That's where the pink and blue came from. And then the suffragettes started to fight for the vote, right? They wanted to vote, the franchise, right? So when they started to fight for the vote, they started to appropriate these colors. They started wearing the pinks and the purples and the reds. And then over a period of time, by the end of Second World War, we have pink and blue as we have it now. And you ask anyone, they will actually tell me. I've had multiple workshops from large multinational corporations right down to Samiti in village, right? And we always have this discussion, and you'd be amazed at the justifications given to why a girl likes pink and a boy likes blue. It's like when they come out of the womb, the girl is looking for pink and the boy is looking for blue. I myself have had personal experience where just before my daughter was born, I was trying to buy a mosquito net and I was asked boy or girl, and I said, I don't know. And the shopkeeper said, take the pink net and go, sir. But if it's a boy, come back and give me the pink net and I'll give you a free exchange and I'll give you a blue net. And I asked the shopkeeper, I said, you know what I mean? What is this? What is this idea that we're putting into the heads of girls and boys? So another exercise that we do is, what are the toys you give a baby? And they list all the toys that they give a baby, and you will see that what they give the baby boy and the baby girl at birth, the only difference is the color. But then when we come to 6 years old, immediate change, right? So the tea sets and the dolls on one side, and then the cars and the tractors and the guns on the other side. And then at 12 years old, what do you give the girl? What do you give the boy? More divisiveness. And then at 18, what is the advice you give a girl? And so you can actually track the mindset that we build, right? Because there is enough research to show, and I'll encourage your viewers to go and see it, that brain development does not differ among human beings. It's input that differs. A boy's brain and a girl's brain has the same ability to grow. Yes, physiologically we are different. Of course we are physiologically different. Yes, men can be stronger, but then again, evolutionarily, men have been primarily in that position of strength. And if you give the girl the opportunity, she also can be strong. I have been to schools where girls have told me they don't have bicep muscle, and that a bicep is a muscle in the boy's body only. And I had to tell that girl that she is moving her hand with the ability of her bicep muscle, and that she has a bicep muscle, and that if she goes to the gym and she picks up a dumbbell and starts doing curls, that her bicep muscle will also develop into a hard muscle, and that she has that potential. These are the conversations I'm having across this country because of what we are putting into the heads of our boys and girls about how different they are, right? Kolla kohomada, kella kohomada. We break it down so far that we even take a look at taboo subjects, and this is a taboo program, so I can say it. We take a look at virginity, right? So in one workshop, I told boys, you can't prove the virginity of the girl. And they got really upset. And then I showed them the diagrams of the different kinds of hymens. And I said, look at these different kinds of hymens. Some of these hymens, especially what we call the normal hymen, when you have sex for the first time, even though it breaks the minute amount of blood that comes, there is no blood that comes onto that sheet. If you put a white sheet, there is no blood that drops down because it's mixed up with vaginal fluid or semen, and there is no blood that comes down. So the girl really has to have like a hymen that allows for the blood to come, like maybe a perforated hymen. And girls who have an imperforate hymen, that means if a hymen has completely covered her vaginal opening, that hymen has to be surgically removed, because when the girl starts to menstruate, the menstrual blood has nowhere to go, right? So when we break it down and we show boys that really you can't prove that a girl is a virgin or not just based on the hymen, it's impossible, they get angry. And one guy told me, sir, then make you sure කරගන්නේ කොහොමද? මං කිව්වා ඔබතුමා sure කරගන්නේ කොහොමද? නෑ මං කියන දේ විශ්වාස කරන්න ඕනේ. I said කෙල්ල කියන දේ විශ්වාස කරන්න ඕනේ. නේද? Now take a look at the mindset that has been built about who that person should have sex with, and the fact that he needs to have sex with a virgin despite අපිට ගෙදර ඇවිල්ලා නා ගන්න පුළුවන් මේකි මහගෙන එන්නද? That is the kind of mindset, right? So this mindset comes from where? What we give them, the input, the biological algorithm, argument again. I'm sure, I don't know if you've read any Yuval Noah Harari. I encourage you to go and read him if you have not read him. I think it's incredibly helpful for you to go and read some, maybe Sapiens or even Homo Deus. The biological input, what goes into our heads, learned behavior, modeling behavior. What are we feeding our children? අපේ ළමයින්ගේ ඔලු ගෙඩි වලට පොවන්නේ මොකද්ද? That is matter. So if we are going to bring about some equity, if we are going to bring about any form of equality, not tomorrow, not day after, but let's say in 30 years, we need substantive education reform. Unless we have substantive education reform where our girls and our boys are taught that they have similar abilities, not the same, because that will just be silly, but similar abilities, especially in terms of their minds, especially in terms of their brains, especially in terms of their bodies. Of course, a girl can't run as fast as a boy, but I would argue that girls in Sri Lanka have probably run faster than the boys in Sri Lanka, as proven time and time again. And I'm not talking about Susantika years and years ago. I'm talking about even if you take a look at recent history. Who is bringing in the medals? It's about opportunity, right? So for me, equality is not just about changing people's minds and stuff like that. It's not just about talk, it's about opportunity. Are we giving the girls the same opportunity that we are giving the boys, right? There is this myth in rural Sri Lanka, කොල්ලෝ වැඩියෙන් කනවා. කෙල්ලෝ කන්නේ කොල්ලෝ වැඩියෙන් කනවා. So I give them another thought exercise. I give them another thought experiment. I say, කොල්ලව ගෙදර තියාගන්න. යාට බෝනික්ක දෙන්න, යාට චට්ටුමුට්ටු සෙට් එක දෙන්න, යාට සුරංගනා කතා පොතක් දෙන්න, ඒව කියවන්න දවස ගත කරන්න කියන්න, කෙල්ලට දෙන්න බැට් එකයි බෝලයයි බයිසිකලයයි පිට්ටනයට යන්න කියන්න, මහන්සි වෙන්න කියන්න, ගස් නගින්න කියන්න, ඊට පස්සේ පොඩ්ඩක් ගෙදර කෙල්ල ගෙදර ආවම කුල්ලා කාමරෙන් එළියට ආවම පොඩ්ඩක් බලන්න කවුද වැඩියෙන් කන්නේ කියලා. It's about output of energy, input of energy. It's very, very simple. Okay? So it's science. And sometimes what we need to do is break this down, okay? And look at the storybooks. Look at the storybooks that we give our kids. Just take a look at our general fairy tales. There is always a charming prince or a prince charming lurking about somewhere to come and save her, right? Even Red Riding Hood needed someone with an axe to come and save her, because that is the predominant narrative that we are feeding our children. The girl is weak, the boy is strong. Right? So for that to change, unless we have substantive education reform, in 30 years, when you are an old man like me, you will be still hitting your head against the same wall, right? Nothing is going to change. It may have changed for your family, it may have changed for your daughters if you ever have kids, but just in general, will it have changed? I think not. Because I have been in this business for quite a long time. I worked 15 years in India. And if you want patriarchy on a macro level, India. But don't get me wrong. Don't think I am saying, oh, look at the Indians, at least we are better. We are not better. We are no better than the Indians. It's just that here it happens less because we don't have 1.5 billion people. We have only 20 million. Okay? But in terms of the brutality, in terms of the patriarchy, in terms of the entitlement, I don't see any difference between the 15 years I spent in India with perpetrators and victims. And since then, the 10 years now that I have spent here, or 11 years that I have spent in Sri Lanka now with perpetrators and victims, in terms of the mental attitude, in terms of the knowledge, in terms of the practice, in terms of the behavior, on an individual basis, I see no difference. Substantive education reform, I can't say it often enough.
Right. I think that's something that everyone across should generally take note of as to what we teach the younger generations and how we mold them. That being said, Mr. Billy Moria, the next question I have for you is that yes, we read about different statistics, we come across statistics that are shocking and alarming, and there are large numbers of cases being reported as well. But on the other hand, there is a tendency of an equally or even a larger number of cases being unheard of or being unreported. Why do you think this happens?
Okay. The reason that there is under-reporting is very simple. It is re-victimization. Okay. So when a victim comes to us or a survivor of violence comes to us, you know what our standard is? If you are going to make a police complaint, even at the women and children's desk, take a lawyer with you. That's a future for you, son. Okay? Take a lawyer with you. Go with a lawyer. Do not go alone. Okay? When I was a very young man in India, I was at a case of rape. And the judge, I will never forget this, it viscerally scarred me. The judge asked the victim, how far apart were your legs spread when he raped you? When you say he raped you? That was the question. How far apart were your legs? Because that in somehow was going to determine whether it was rape or not. Right? That was a judge in a court of law that asked that question way back in 1996. Okay? Way back in 1996. That was a judge. But believe you me, it is no different at the Sri Lankan police station. Okay, we are working very hard, and there are some excellent police officers. This is not me trying to malign all police officers. We are working with some excellent police officers to try and change that system. But for example, if you take a look at a girl who has shared an intimate photograph, now the ex-boyfriend is sharing that around, and she goes to the picture. She goes to give the complaint. What is the question? Right? So that is not the question. The question is the violation of the consent and the violation of the trust, and the fact that she is being blackmailed for 70,000 rupees. That is the problem. There are cases that come to us, they have been paying 25,000, 40,000, 50,000 rupees a month because of the shame that is associated with the naked picture, and they don't want that picture to go out. They have been paying since 2008, and they come to us in 2018. They've been paying for 10 years and can't afford to pay anymore. Okay? So why are they not reporting? Because of the re-victimization. Because of our asking for it culture. Right? කෙල්ලට මොනාරි හිරිහැරෙක් වුණොත් මොකක්ද අපි ආන්නේ? කෙල්ල මොකක්ද ඇඳගෙන හිටියේ? කොයි වෙලාවටද ගියේ? කෙල්ල කොහොමද හැසිරුනේ? පැද්දද ඇවිද්දේ? ඇයි ඔයා තනියම ගියේ? Those are the questions that we ask. One of the cases I handled, again, she did not report. She went to the JMO, but she did not proceed with the case. She got drunk. Okay? She got drunk. She went to a nightclub, she drank, then she went to a house party. This was in December time, so before COVID, pre-COVID times. And she was 20 years old. She got drunk, and guess what? When she got drunk, she needed to vomit, right? So she went to the bathroom and she vomited. And she walked out of the bathroom and she saw a bed, because it was a house party, it was a house. She saw a bed. And guess what she did? She passed out on the bed. Now, I don't know your association with alcohol. I'm sure you don't touch a drop. But if you know anyone who drinks and someone who vomits and then sees a bed, I can guarantee you the most natural thing in the world, the most human thing in the world is to fall down on that bed and go to sleep. That's just human, right? She woke up being raped, right? She woke up being raped. Now, her friends victimized her. Why did you go to the bathroom alone? You should have come. You should have taken me. Why did you wear such a short dress? And by the time we counsel rape survivors sometimes, so by the time this survivor came to me, she was completely self-inflicting blame. Right? I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done this. My friends asked me these questions. I can't answer them. I said, to tell you frankly, there is only one question here. Why did the perpetrator climb on top of the comatose girl? That is the question. What makes the perpetrator climb on top of the comatose girl, the girl that is passed out? What gives you the sense of entitlement to walk into a room, see a girl that is passed out and climb on top of her and rape her? That is the question that we have to ask. Not why did you fall asleep after getting drunk and vomiting, because that is something that anyone would do. Api dehi gahanawani. If one of our friends falls down drunk, api dehi kayallak aragana podda dehi parak dana. Right? Or we make sure that the person is comfortable. We make sure that the person is on side and doesn't vomit or doesn't lie back and vomit because he can choke on his vomit. That is what we do. That is how we look after someone who is drunk. We don't jump on the person and rape that person. Right? So look at that. That is my answer to your question. What are we going to do with these attitudes that exist? What are we going to do? Again, I come back in terms of the entitlement that our boys and men feel in this country. And unless we change that, all these efforts that we make are going to be very difficult. Now, to tell you frankly, we are not even, it may sound counterintuitive to you, I'm not even a fan really of big campaigns. I have not stood on the road for years holding up boards, because I stood up at Lipton Circus, no, you call it, near Town Hall. I stood there one day holding a board in 2013. That's the last time I stood. And I had something like, don't go home and hit your wife or something. And I was holding up that board, and this car came by and it stopped and it put the shutter down. It looked at the board, it looked at my face, put the shutter up, and it went. It struck me, I was thinking, that guy, if he actually hits his wife, the 30 seconds or the 20 seconds spent reading my board changed that when he goes home today. And I had to come to the hard conclusion that is not. And I had to come to the hard conclusion then okay, what do we do? How do we change that? What is the way forward? And then as we've been searching, we've come to the very hard and difficult conclusion that we have to start as early as possible. We have to start in preschools. We have to start in primary schools. We have to teach things like respect and consent and self-esteem. We have to nurture self-esteem. We have to teach things like trust. We have to start in primary schools and nursery schools. We have to have මේ සංකල්ප ගැන අපේ ළමයින්ගේ ඔලු ගෙඩි වලට ඒ කාලෙම දාන්න ඕන. So we need to take a look at psychological models like Jean Piaget's stages of cognitive development and see how we can do it scientifically. The models are out there. There are programs in Sri Lanka already implementing models like that. There are in Gaul where she runs a program called Sangvedi, where they are trying to help kids treat other kids or treat each other based on principles of empathy. Where is the empathy? Do we even talk about empathy in this country? සිංහලෙන් empathy වලට කියන්නේ සහකම්පනය කියලා. මං සහකම්පනය කියද්දී මිනිස්සු බලන මොකද්ද මේ වචනේ අහලවත් නැහැ මේ වචනේ. සහකම්පනය. Right? So this empathy, how do we foster that? How do we nurture that? The models exist. Need someone sitting up there to think, yes, this is what we need. We need substantive education reform, not this rote learning nonsense that we are engaged now, right? Where you suck something up and you vomit it out and there is no retention. That is not right. You know what school did you go to?
I went to school.
Okay, so I don't need to tell you. Okay, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All right, I went to a similar school. I went to St. Thomas's in Mount Lavinia. Same thing. I got a credit pass Sinhala by Katapadang fine Ayanayaka, and if Ayanayaka didn't come for that, then where would I have been? You know what I mean? Right? You ask me anything about Ayanayaka now, you think I can quote Ayanayaka? I can't quote Ayanayaka. You think I can quote Salini Sandesha? I can't quote Salini Sandesha. I can't quote anything that I did for my O-levels because all I split up and vomit it out. Right? There is no retention. Okay, because that is the rote learning methodology that is employed in our schools. So when I'm talking about substantive education reform, I don't mean a period where you teach respect. I mean how we infuse it into everything that we do, where we teach our young people to think analytically, right? To think analytically. We don't wait till university. I'd argue that in certain departments at university, I don't think that they teach you to think analytically either. I don't know about the law department, but I'd argue that certain universities, they don't do that. I've been part of a university system where they used to come out, read out notes, and then the professor used to tell, now just regurgitate these notes for the exam and you'll be okay. I don't want to regurgitate notes for an exam. I want to learn. I want to retain, right? So unless we have a change in attitude on a much sort of wider level, gender-based violence, violence against women and girls statistics, our violence statistics are not going to change, right? It's not going to happen. Take a look at I don't know if you've come into contact yet with the grave crimes abstract of the Sri Lanka police. You can get it online at police.lk. Just take a look at those statistics. Take a look at the fact that the Sri Lanka police this is how they collect statistics on rape. They have what is under 16, what do you call it? Statutory rape, right? They have two categories of statutory rape. Yeah, two categories of statutory rape. Statutory rape with consent, statutory rape without consent. Right? If you don't believe me, go to the grave crimes abstract and take a look of Sri Lanka police. Statutory rape with consent, statutory rape without consent. Now, statutory rape with consent means that the young woman consensually engaged in that sexual activity, and that is why they put it as statutory rape with consent. Couple with consent. But take a look at the oxymoron there. Take a look at the oxymoron there. Statutory rape with consent. Take a look at how we have, just by that classification, take a look at the patriarchal influence that is at play. Okay, and again, just go to police.lk, grave crimes abstract, download and verify what I just said.
Right. So, Mr. Villimore, I think I completely agree with you when you talk about substantial educational reform. It should go all the way down to preschools, and it should also be there even in university levels as well. And this is something that I speak from experience as well, that we need a better, a refined, more learning process for the country if there is a substantial development, so to speak. With that being said, on this discussion about how gender-based violence is prevalent in Sri Lanka as well, I think it will be useful for us to know that the legal as well as the organizational frameworks that are there in the country to which the victims can reach out for, and how we can utilize those or develop those mechanisms so that we can address these issues much better.
Well, I think the most sensible first step, if there has been any kind of violation, I alluded to it earlier, take a lawyer and go to the women and children's desk. If you are a woman, if you are a man, take a lawyer and go to the appropriate desk at a police station. I think we need to ensure that we hold our law enforcement accountable. We have done, along with the police commission and this organization called Women in Need, the Grassroots Trust worked with the CID, Cybercrime Division, and the Sri Lanka Women and Children's Desk to come up with a standard operating procedure, at least on cyber exploitation and violence and online violence for the police. That was released last year, pre-COVID. Unfortunately, COVID has not allowed for the furthering of that and a training of the police officers. But what I'm trying to get at here is that we have a mechanism in place, right? We have the laws in place. We have the Domestic Violence Act, which is huge, right? So while there is room for law reform, and I know that there are groups currently with the current government working on law reform, groups like Women in Need work law reform. the existing laws are rigorous and can be used to good effect, provided we have the right support. And that is where your calling or your fraternity is very, very important in terms of making sure that victims and survivors get justice. I'll go back to that case at the Kurunegala Magistrate Court where the defense counsel argued that the 11-year-old was asking for it. That is going to be the, if you are a criminal defense lawyer, that is right? But how do we counter that? Do we have the laws in place to counter that? Yes, we do. And if you go to bakamuno.lk and if you go to violence prevention, all the laws pertaining to the different violations that occur to women, girls, whoever, in terms of gender-based violence are all listed. If you need support, if you need legal support, and if you come to us, we work very closely with the Women in Need team. We work very closely with the Child Protection Force team, where we can offer pro bono legal services. We can identify legal support for you. So it's out there. You are by no means alone. You don't have to feel that you don't have the money for a good lawyer. We can find you the support that you require. That is part of what we do. Maybe one day you can come and work with us too, once you qualify. That is part of what we do, because making sure that the existing legal framework works as best as it can in terms of this mechanism, works as best as it can for the victim, is something that can happen provided you put the work in, right? So it's not a lawless country by any means. Okay, it is a country that has the potential for justice. Unfortunately, again, if you take a look at Grave Crimes Abstract, take a look at how many cases actually get justice. That's our problem. What is, maybe your someone in the law fraternity or your law college can tell you, how long does it take for a rape case, for example, to go through the system? Is there a way to fast track cases, especially when a child is raped? Is there a way, or grave sexual abuse? Is there a way to fast track that system? Because sometimes the parents themselves and the case is still going on. At which point then the incentive is to, oh, I can't continue this with any cases drop. Right? So that is where we need reform also. Of course, we need legal reform. We need legal reform in terms of how quickly a case can go. So depending on the numbers you listen to, I have heard it takes average of 8 years. I have heard it takes an average of 14 years. It depends on which report you read and who you talk, right? So I think that is an area which can prove to be a deterrent again, like the re-victimization within law enforcement, that can be a deterrent for the victim to come forward. So what is going to happen? Nothing is going to happen. This case is never going to end. I'll just have to keep going to court, and nothing will happen. So you have that, right? That the laws in this country are in no form a deterrent for sexual violence. So you have that. So that is where you also need reform. But I think an energetic criminal lawyer on the side of the victim and survivor can do wonders. And I've seen it happen. I've seen justice being done. So I have a lot of faith in, now at grassroots we say we believe in people. We believe in people, and we believe in the lawyer also, especially the lawyers that work with us.
Right. I think on that positive note, Mr. Billy Moria, we have to come to the conclusion of today's session. As much as we would have liked for this session to continue, even for the unfortunate work time restraints. That being said, it was definitely an eye-opener personally for myself, and I'm sure to all our viewers it would be very interesting, and there's going to be a lot to gain out of this in terms of how you approach these issues, how you really understand who you are dealing with, and if you are a victim, what you can do, and so as to take this as a stepping stone, so to speak, and work towards creating a better Sri Lanka for all of us. On behalf of the Leo Club of University of Colombo, let me once again extend our gratitude to Mr. Hans Billy Moria for joining with us today and for educating us on this topic, which definitely needs to be talked about in this country more often. That being said, let me once again remind all of you that this is the talk show series organized in connection with the official newsletter of the University of Colombo Leos, and you will be able to watch this session on YouTube or read about this on the official newsletter as well. Once again, thanking all of you, and with the hope of seeing you soon with a similar episode, we conclude today's session. Thank you, goodbye, and stay safe.